Now, you might understandably think that the UK and the USA are very similar because we have a shared language, English. But you would be very wrong. In fact, the shared language can trick people into thinking we're more similar than we are. I had a friend who went to live and work in the United States, and he was lulled into a false sense of security because of the shared language. Instead, it was as much of a culture shock as it would have been moving to any other country. The United Kingdom and the United States. Two countries with, yes, an entwined history, but they couldn't be more different culturally. So in this fun, casual conversation lesson, I thought I would discuss the big cultural differences between the UK and the US because many people find that interesting. I will speak slowly and clearly, unless I get excited because then I speak quite fast, I'm sorry. But I will put any difficult phrases or useful vocabulary up on the screen as I speak so that you can pick up new phrases. Hopefully this will be entertaining as well as informative. What are the big differences between the US and the UK? Stay until the end and you will find out. Let's get started. The American and British senses of humour are very different. In the UK, humour is often dry, understated, and very sarcastic. British humour can be quite self-deprecating. People make jokes about themselves, and they often don't even smile when they're joking, hence why we describe it as dry, a very dry delivery. In the US, humour is more direct, enthusiastic, and story-based. Americans often laugh loudly, use exaggeration, and enjoy big reactions. Let's take a scenario as an example. You have cooked a horrendous meal and it has gone disastrously wrong. This is how a British person and an American person would joke about that and tell the story. A British person might say, well, I spent 3 hours cooking dinner. The kitchen's a mess, the chicken burned, and all of my guests turned up 3 hours late. So, basically, a complete success. And here, the British person would be using irony when they say the opposite of what they mean. But notice, the delivery is completely deadpan. So basically, a complete success. There's no smile and no obvious clue it's a joke. That's a very British way of telling that story. An American, on the other hand, would make it more like a story, very energetic and relatable, and they would do it in quite an exaggerated way. An American might say, so I'm trying to cook dinner like a grown-up. The oven's on fire, the smoke alarm is screaming, I'm waving the dish towel like it's the 4th of July. Welcome to adulthood. This is not what I pictured when I was growing up. And what's funny about this one, it's an animated story full of exaggeration and emotion. The humor comes from the shared chaos, how big the reaction is. Do you see how differently a British person and an American person would tell that story? That epitomizes the difference between the British sense of humour and the American sense of humour. British humour downplays everything, whereas American humour amplifies everything. Difference number 2, politeness and small talk. British people are known for being very polite, especially with strangers. We put a lot of emphasis on manners and courtesy. That's why we say please and thank you all the time. We say sorry a lot, even when it's not our fault. For example, if you bump into a British person, we will probably say, oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. And yet, the politeness comes hand in hand with being reserved. It takes quite a lot for us to let our guard down. In the US, people are friendly, but in a very different way. Americans, for example, are much more likely to start a conversation with a complete stranger than a British person is. An American might say to a stranger, oh, hey, I love your shoes. Where did you get those from? British people might find this a little bit too personal at first, and Americans might find British people a bit cold. Food is a big cultural difference. In the UK, meals are modest and often quite traditional. A classic British meal might be a Sunday roast or a full English breakfast. And yes, the stereotype of fish and chips. But that's not all we eat. In the US, food is bigger, sweeter, and faster. Think burgers, milkshakes, drive-through restaurants. All those famous fast food chains, they nearly always originate in America. Also, British people tend to eat a later dinner around 7 or 8 p.m, whereas I hear in many parts of the US, people eat more at 5 or 6 p.m. Oh, an important difference in vocabulary between British and American, especially if you have a sweet tooth. In the UK, pudding refers to all desserts. A British person after a meal will say, "What's for pudding?" Whereas in America, pudding is a specific type of dessert. They call every other dessert desserts. So it confuses Americans when British people refer to puddings the whole time. In general, British culture values a better work-life balance. People in the UK take many more holidays, and it's normal to take several weeks off in summer to go away. We normally get about 25 holiday days per year in a regular job. In the US, the work culture is much more intense. Americans get fewer holidays. They don't have the legal limits that we have. In the UK, you have to have a certain amount of holiday days by law. Americans take fewer holidays, and many people feel guilty taking time off. In the UK, someone might say, "I'm off on holiday for 2 weeks." That's very standard, very typical, but an American would react, 2 weeks? You're so lucky. I only get 5 days in the whole year. Also, tipping is a big part of American culture, which leads us on to number 5, the tipping culture. In the UK, tipping really is optional. You might leave 10% if the service was good, but it isn't required. I will say, however, that adding a discretionary service charge is becoming more common in most restaurants. So many restaurants now just add the tip onto the bill. But we don't have the same tipping culture as the US. In the US, tipping is essential. Most workers in restaurants or cafes depend on tips because their salaries are so low. So in the US, it's normal to tip 15 to 20%. But in the UK, if you tipped 20%, the waiter would say, thank you so much, because most people wouldn't tip 20%. So if you travel to the US, make sure you tip. In the UK, you can be more selective about it. Number 6, attitudes towards success. Americans are often more open about their ambitions, and success is something to be celebrated. For example, I started my own business. It's going really well. Yeah, we're expanding actually to Europe now. Yeah, I know. British people are much more reserved. For us, being modest and humble is a very attractive quality. So talking too much about your successes might come across as boasting or sounding too arrogant. So we might say, "Oh, it's just a little side project." Even if it is wildly successful, we'll play it down. So Americans might see Brits as modest or even negative, but British people might see Americans as overly confident or even pushy. Which leads me nicely to number 7, and that is American optimism versus British realism. Americans tend to be very positive. If you tell Americans your ambitions, they'll say, "Hey, go for it." In America, anyone can be anything. It's all bound up with our idea of the American dream. You can never shoot too high for something. You should shoot for the stars. You should try your hardest. They encourage people to go for it. British people tend to be more realistic. And even if we have high hopes for the future, we probably won't say it because we're afraid of jinxing it. If I have an American friend and a British friend and I tell them about my business plans, my business ambitions, the American friend would say, "Oh, it's going to be great. You're going to be amazing." Whereas the British person would say, "Oh, okay. Have you thought about this though? Have you put the plan in place? Do you have a clear strategy? Don't put all your eggs in one basket." There is a difference between down-to-earth, more realistic approach of British people, sometimes even pessimistic or cynical, versus the American idealism and positivity. Which one sounds more appealing to you? This one is easy. In the UK, people drive on the left, and in the US, people drive on the right. But British people have the steering wheel on the right side of the car, and Americans have it on the left side of the car. A car park in the UK is a parking lot in the US. And a petrol station in the UK is a gas station in the US. I've also heard American friends comment on how much harder it is to drive in the UK and Europe than in the US. In North America, the roads are very wide, and so are the parking spaces. You don't need to maneuver that much to get the car in. Whereas in the UK, in some places we have very, very narrow lanes where you have to drive very carefully. And also our parking spaces are much tighter. I suppose it makes sense given how much smaller we are as a nation. Let's move on to something a bit deeper, our sense of identity. In the US, people often feel very proud to be American. It is a very, very overtly patriotic country. They talk about freedom, independence, and the American dream. It's a land of the brave and the free. You see the American flag everywhere. People fly it out of their homes on a daily basis. In the UK, no one really flies a Union Jack outside their house, unless maybe it's a sports match or the Jubilee or something. In the UK, people are more skeptical or ironic about national pride. Although yes, British people do have a sort of patriotism. It's a quiet patriotism, an understated patriotism. It might come out if someone is talking very negatively about our country. We can talk terribly about our country and say, oh, this is terrible, this is terrible, this is terrible. But we get defensive if someone else is disparaging about our country. So an American might say, oh, I love this country, I'm so proud to be American. Whereas a British person might say, no, the UK has its moments. The difference can be quite confusing, but it's all about the cultural tone. Education is a big one. In the UK, every school has school uniform, whether it's a private school or a state school. American schools often don't. In the UK, students go to university. In the US, they go to college. For us, in the UK, college is slightly different. College is something called sixth form college, which is just before university. And obviously, we have a different grading system. In terms of universities as well, whilst yes, British universities are expensive, they're not nearly as expensive as many of the American universities. The elite American universities are very, very expensive, whereas the UK, there is a standard rate. I think it's £9,000 a year. I'd have to double check, but I'm pretty sure it's £9,000 a year, and that's standard across all universities. And obviously there is the difference in our language, in our intonation, where we put the stress in the word, in our use of tenses. A British person would use the present perfect to say, have you done your homework yet? Whereas an American would say, did you do your homework yet? And obviously there is the difference between the vocabulary. In the UK, pants, in the US are underwear, and in America, pants are trousers in the UK. So that one can get Americans into trouble. We say crisps, they say chips. Crisps, chips. Our chips are fries in America. We say biscuit, they say cookie. For us, a cookie is a specific type of biscuit. Biscuits more general. They call all biscuits cookies. We've already talked about pudding and desserts. We say jumper, they say sweater. We say football, they say soccer. And there are many more, and these can lead to very funny misunderstandings. So there you are, a few of the big cultural differences between the UK and the US. Obviously, that was just some of them, not all of them. There are many more, and every person is different and might find different things surprising. Also, there are exceptions. I'm sure you can find an American who isn't really patriotic and a British person who is very patriotic. You can find a British person who is much more enthusiastic and outgoing than someone who's more reserved who's American. These were generalizations, but even as generalizations, they're pretty accurate to describe the different mentalities and attitudes in the US and the UK. If you want to learn more about accents or vocabulary differences, make sure you look at my other videos. I have one where I go into a lot of detail about the difference between the British accent and the American accent. So make sure you look at that if you found this interesting. And if you enjoyed it, please like, comment, subscribe. This is a relatively new channel, so it really helps me out when you do. If you are interested in receiving a free PDF with 20 very useful phrases in British English,
click on the link below. All you have to do is put in your email and I will send the free PDF to you. You don't have to do anything else, and I'll be sending more free resources out in future.
Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.